fear through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jiggle my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still have me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hey, welcome in everybody to the next edition of the Disciples of Ed podcast. I am, of course, not Rob. I am Joe Borig, joined by Steve, hosting the show tonight to fill in for Rob. How you doing today, Steve?
Doing all right. Finally got a win after a tough weekend, so hopefully better things to come.
Yeah, we got a win. We'll get on to this later, but Ghost looks solid and JVR keeps on rocking. But first things first, we'll get to what do you think of the overall team performance from this team thus far, and in comparison to yesterday's game? What do you just feel? What are your feelings on the team right now?
It's still a work in progress, as we mentioned in the last show. No training camp or preseason. It's kind of affecting every team, especially defensively. But the Boston game Saturday, that was a complete shit show. I don't know if I can point out a single positive from it outside of Carter Hart actually showing frustration, which he should. He deserves it. He's been so mentally sound, mentally tough. These moments are going to happen, and it's just good to see him kind of take it on his stick, kind of threw the shaft end of it towards Eric Gustafsson, which was hilarious, but it's probably the only positive I could say out of that game. Other than that, as we'll talk about later on, is JVR seems to be on his hot streak early in the season, which is nice and really helpful now. I kind of just want to toss out the Boston series. Blame Rob for jinxing us, thinking that we would sweep them in the 2-game set. But it's the same issues are just coming up over and over again against New Jersey. They were still there, but with Ghost there, even just one player, he was able to help the transition, get us towards the forecheck a little bit more. So it worked out. Elliott played strong. But we still just got to work on all these little things that we've already noted so many times already this season. The defensive play still needs to be worked on. The forwards need to forecheck more. Will help out a little bit in the transition in the neutral zone. But it's a work in progress. Hopefully, by February next week, we'll work out the kinks, even with all the injuries, and we should be good to go.
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. I think in the first game with Boston, when we played them on Thursday, there we go, when we were up, if you look statistically in that game, we shouldn't have been up 2-0. And then Boston ended up coming back. They they by far played the better game in that game. And then we ended up losing in a shootout. That was one of those games that it almost felt like we were the Arizona Coyotes of last year for one day, where it's like you just scored when you had no shots on goal, basically, and somehow you were winning for a period of the game, and then you ended up losing because the hockey gods straightened out the world again.
Yeah, it was so frustrating. I mean, you're up 2-0, and then you just completely collapse 2 separate times in the third period. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, it was definitely, I know Studnicka scored early in the third for what was his first. I don't know if he scored since, but that was his first career goal. And then Coyle tied it up, and then the floodgates kind of opened after that. Sanheim gave us the lead one more time, but that was the last lead we had, and then Boston took over. So I think that was a game that at least we were able to get a point out of it, because you want to get a point out of everything, but Boston, I wouldn't be shocked if they're the team that does give us the most trouble, because we tend to play close games and very brute battle-esque games against Boston.
Yeah, I agree. It was also concerning, the start of that third period, they scored within a minute, and then they scored hardly 2 minutes later. It's just these quick succession goals happening against us, particularly when Carter Hart's in net, is my cause for concern. Hopefully he can get through this. Elliott starting last night. Hopefully he gives Hart a little bit of a mental break. He can get himself back focused and stopping some of these, what we've seen stoppable for him in the past, and just getting back to his game from last year, because he hasn't been bad this year. He has just not been up to par of what we've expected. Maybe they're a bit too high expectations, but I think he'll be able to relax himself and focus and improve upon the errors he's made so far.
Yeah, I think Hart definitely. I think putting in Moose for that first game was smart by AV to be able to give Hart a little bereavement period, and I have a feeling he'll probably start tomorrow, but we'll have to see. But Elliott did come up big in that game because we ended up out shooting them in the end. But early on, the Devils definitely had the more potent pressure as the game first initially started. And then we were able to, I believe, by the end of the period, balance out the shots with a good second half of the first. But that first half of the first was very helped by Brian Elliott. So I definitely agree with that. We could have been down 3-0 if he didn't make some of those saves.
Yeah.
But I think yesterday is really showing kind of the play, even through how you said we still had a little bit of gaps in our game. It's kind of showed how you have to play and how they showed the perseverance through making the mistakes. That's what we didn't really see against Boston, and we didn't see in some of the earlier games when we were showing a little bit of struggle, where I think yesterday with the lineup we had, it kind of persevered, and even when they made a couple issues, we really got through it and was able to play a pretty clean game in the end after we got off to that sluggish start. That's really the only thing I have to highlight as a huge glaring thing from yesterday is against certain teams you wouldn't be able to get off to that slow of a 10-minute about start and then just play great after that like we did to be able to beat them. That won't work against everybody, but
Right.
The Devils are a younger team. They had Scott Wedgwood in net instead of Blackwood, so that's very beneficial. And you were able to take advantage of that. So I think this game was a good sign for me because it showed that fight that we had last year where even when we didn't play our best game, we would normally still put in a somewhat like, you know what I mean, like a winning effort with AV where we at least compete to the end, where we didn't have that same thing happening every game this year. So I was happy to see that more fight and grit that we resonate with AV and his system in yesterday's game.
Yeah, I agree. Especially with the still having a fight even when a game's kind of out of hand. You know, they're still trying to at least in some way mount any chance of a comeback. It's tougher in a 56 game season because, you know, you don't have as much time to make up these points that you're missing out on some of these, the two blowouts, one against Buffalo, one against Boston, where, you know you have no chance basically. Like that's more acceptable in an 82 game season where it's like, okay, we could just scrap this game, get back to, you know, what we're really capable of in the future, but we can't really have that this year in a shortened season. But against New Jersey, you know, Elliott was kind of like, he got some help from the post later in the game, but he was able to like really settle things down. We were able to draw penalties and actually succeed on the power play. I think Claude Giroux played quite possibly one of his best games in probably a year or so, best all-around game. He looked dangerous every single time he was on the ice, even with us probably thinking he's a bit too patient on some things. So then it works out where he's really pulled Wedgwood all the way out and getting an open net goal for, I forget who it was.
Patrick. That was Patrick.
Nolan Patrick, yeah. Yeah. So seeing Giroux be able to play like the prime Giroux that we have seen before was great to see. And Provorov played really great. I think him and Ghost are the best bet we have right now until Elise Myers comes back and to give him a shot for that top pair.
Yep.
They seem to like kind of like rekindle the chemistry they had a couple of years ago. They were able to work well together. And I tweeted it out saying my hot take, Ghost being back in the lineup led to Provorov just saying, I'm not giving up this top unit spot. Getting all those deflection assists for JVR. So I think it was a great game by him. Everybody else, you know, there's still a little bit of the struggles that you're seeing, but I think Giroux and Provorov and probably Elliott are like mainly the standouts of that game. And if we're able to keep that going, whether it's Elliott or Hart, we should be able to, you know, eke out some of these wins. We just hope that we fix everything else so that we can go back to dominating teams like we did towards the end of last year.
Yeah, I definitely think that was huge, being able to show more consistency, having G come out when he beat. Congratulations to him, by the way, for having the captaincy the longest out of anyone in Flyers history now.
I think that motivated him a bit.
Yeah, I think it did too, because JJ even said it on the broadcast. He doesn't normally get caught up in numbers, but Giroux even said himself that this is a special moment for him, and that's not something you normally. G just goes about his business, and he even knew he had to acknowledge how special of a moment being able to beat someone like Clarkey in the amount of games played. You have to definitely acknowledge that, just like the Phillies did when J-Roll beat Schmidt in his record. So I was happy with that, and I think that was definitely huge to see that game out of G, who's been the facilitator, obviously, to start this year. We thought he scored a goal that one game, but then I think they changed it to someone else. So I don't know.
Konechny.
Yeah, I think TK tipped it, so he still
Want
has
him to keep that goal lead at the time.
Yeah, but he still hasn't scored yet. But he's been the great passer, and he's been playing a really good game so far. And that was actually a brilliant play by Giroux. At first, I thought he was being a little overly patient, but then it turns out Wedgwood overcommitted to him. And then all we had to do was wait and just send it in front to Patrick there for that very, very easy goal for him. And I think having Farabee also get a goal yesterday too, who's been playing solid flying around the ice but hasn't been able to capitalize point-wise, might also, how he just started getting going like a hot streak last year, that might also propel him to really get going, because he was looked good on the ice. It's just sometimes when you're snake bidding on the score sheet, that does sometimes affect your overall play for a little bit until you get that first goal, that first assist in a while. We're like in the same thing to resonate with a baseball analogy, that first hit of the season, something along those lines. And I think that might really help to get him going, the fact he was able to pot one yesterday too.
I agree, especially since it's been, he had that outstanding first game, was it the 4-point game? And then ever since that, he kind of trailed off, but injuries kind of like affected the lineup. It seemed like he was kind of getting bounced around. But I think it was Lindblom or Lawton on that play made a nice subtle check in the offensive zone that really opened up the lanes for the passing, and then eventually basically an empty net goal for him.
Yeah, and then the actual empty net goal was when Provy, who was gassed from a block shot and being on the ice for so long, sent it all the way down the ice and looked like he was about to pass out.
That's twice this year. It was one for him, one for Hayes. Just the kind of lucky dumps that just found the net.
Yeah, that's true. But now we can move on. We already brought him up in mentioning the game a little bit, but Shane Gostisbehere and just everything he was able to do in his first game. You already brought him up how you liked him with Provy, so dive into that a little bit more. What did you see in his first game?
With him on the second unit, I feel like when he was on the ice for the power play, for about nearly the whole power play, he didn't let the puck get out of the zone, which is one of his strongest suits on the power play, because he's very kind of acrobatic with how he attempts to keep the puck in any which way possible for him. It's definitely one of his stronger suits. He made some nice, smart plays, getting the puck into transitions, smart passes, breakout passes. He had one instance where I wish Rob was on the show right now, where he had kind of like a Gustafsson showing, where he made that backhand attempt to clear, but it looked like it was batted out of the air, I think, or maybe he just flubbed it. But he showed more determination in clearing the puck with that backhand than Gustafsson has shown at all in our defensive zone. But other than that, there were times I could see Ghost is to the side of our goalie by the crease, and then there's an offensive player in front of our goalie. He doesn't even bother try to stick him out or kind of nudge him. Well, it's not really his game, but I would just like to see a little bit more of that. But at the same time, he's missed some time, and he was never really that physical guy outside of real potential of an open ice hit. But other than that, like I said before, he just seems like he gels with Provorov the best out of any of the healthy defensemen right now. So hope he just keeps it going.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when those guys first came in and were on a line together, that was perceived as potentially one of the next great defensive line tandems if everything went right. And then Ghost had all the injury history hit, and then now he's back and he seems fully healthy. So I don't think it'll ever go back to that. Don't get me wrong. But if you can get a shell of what that line used to be, then you still have one of the better defensive lines via the great offensive talent of Ghost and the two-way ability of Provorov. But I mean, what I see in Ghost is he just seems very hungry out there, where he was making some plays at the blue line when guys were coming first into the zone that you're not as used to seeing him do yesterday as well. And then the one mistake he made, he speeded back like Speedy Gonzalez to be the guy to block the pass from, I can't remember who it was, trying to center it in front. Yeah. So I think I saw a lot of good signs from him. He played very hungry out there, and I think he's showing he definitely wants to be a part of the future core of the team. But speaking about hungry, if you're hungry for food, please check out Just Foods at 215-794-3663 and check out our man Asian Rob. He's a great friend of the show. Ask him for the chef special. You will not be disappointed. The food there is amazing. You will love it, and you will devour it as you're watching the game, hopefully for good reasons and not eating your sorrows away. But again, check out Just Foods, 215-794-3663. And please check out please let our man Asian Rob know that you're a friend of the podcast. Ask for the chef special and get some of the best food going from Just Food. But anyway, back to Ghost. I mean, I just really liked the play I saw from him. I liked what he said coming in. He seems like he's very motivated, and he seems like he did really quickly and probably over the period of being out study up more on AV system, because he just looked way more comfortable than last year, where it seemed like he really used his time away with COVID wisely, in my opinion, just from how solid he looked on the ice in his first game back. And by the way, playing 22 minutes after coming off of a virus that's supposed to make you get a lot tired a lot quicker. So,
definitely.
Yeah, I thought that was a great accomplishment in itself, to be able to play near the amount Provy played, even that close to it, when you just came off of a virus. I mean, that just goes to show how much he's worked on conditioning, coming back fully healthy this year, how much he's worked on game planning and the whole 9 yards. And I think he definitely needs to be shouted out for that.
Yeah, I agree. I probably have like one last thing on Ghost. You mentioned how he made that great return on a 2-on-1 to break up the pass. That's always been like a strong suit of his game, whether it be a 2-on-1 or he has to get back. He always seems to like read the play pretty well. I'm not going to say he blocks it all the time, but he always just looks like he's making most likely the best decision, whether it's, spreading out, diving, whatever needs to be done. He's willing to do it. And I do think that he really wants to be like a part of like this top four. He had that 65-point season. He's probably never going to get back to that again. And, that when he was hurt, going through like the struggles he had for a couple seasons, I was like, you know what? He just has to accept what he is. He's a third pair guy with a defensive partner while playing power play minutes. And I still think that is basically what he is. But if he can really like round out his defensive game, which it's only been one game, but it looks like he shown that he can, then he really does deserve to be in the top four here or anywhere else.
Yeah. I think he did look awesome. I think that's a way to explain it. He probably is more of a second or third guy if he doesn't stay that consistent on the defense. But I feel like with Provy, that's when he, like you said, he plays the most comfortable, and he knows what risks he can take, and he knows what risks he can't take because he's been with him, and that's the guy he's most comfortable with. So I have a feeling because of Provorov and the fact that he's very comfortable with him, they'll be pretty good still with the first line. And it also seems like, pointing out with the defense, Charlie O'Connor, while we're on the topic of defense, got the answer out that once Myers comes back, as of now, obviously if Friedman improves his play, he seems like he would be the guy coming back out once Myers comes back in. Of course, if Mark Friedman improved his play and Justin Braun struggled, that might change in due time. But for right now, it seems like that would be the way they would go.
Yeah, I really like Mark Friedman. He seems like the perfect third pair guy. He's not going to lose you a game. He's not going to win you a game, but he's going to play just a sound, steady game. Like, he'll make the easy passes, the safe plays, basically. I'm coming to the point where I probably trust him more than Braun, who, like we've mentioned, has just gotten so much slower, kind of late reactionary. And Robert Haig, who I'm just kind of done with, but if you have a rotating three of those guys on your bottom pair, it's not the end of the world, but it could be better.
Yeah, That is completely true. I mean, I think it's a good platoon. I think the thing with Hag is you don't have another Gudis. So if you want to have somebody that can be aggressive, block shots, and hit, you don't have another guy.
Yeah.
there's
Braun
nobody
seems like
else.
he has like the physical body for it. I just don't think he's really like that type. He's just more of a sound defensive guy.
Exactly. Yeah, he could do it if he commits to it more. And I think if he wants to stay relevant longer, that's what he's going to have to do because he's getting slower on his skates. I think if he wants to hang out in the league longer, that's a big part of his game. He's going to have to start adding more of the forecheck and the hits along the boards because you're right. He does have the frame to do it. He just doesn't necessarily do it.
Yeah. I'm sure. I feel like I remember him doing it more with San Jose, but again, that's that Western Conference style of play. So maybe this is him trying to adapt to the East, but who's to say? He's also getting older, but we'll see with him.
Yep. And then for here, we also have another key piece of our team that we thought maybe at the beginning of the year, due to his struggling 2019-20 season, which seems like the 2019-20 season was 2 years ago if you think of the beginning of the season now.
Right.
But, oh, wait, it was. But anyway, JVR has looked really good this year and has played really well. So he's went from being a guy that you were thinking you might be able to leave out there for Seattle to, if he keeps playing like this, being a guy like, no, Seattle, you ain't getting his hands on this guy if over a dead body. So that's what do you think of how impressive he's looked? And he's also seemed to put more detail into forechecking and defense himself than we've seen in the pit.
I agree with everything you said about except the Seattle thing. I'm complete flipped side of that. I think we should be happy to see JVR doing this well this early in the season so that it increases the chances of Seattle taking him. So we get it, and that's purely a cap thing. I really like JVR, but he is a very streaky player. He always ends up like topping out like the same like points, per 82 like points per game. It's just all about ice time with him. Like he will put it up. He just does it in very streaky sets. Like right now we're seeing the hot streak of JVR. Eventually it's kind of inevitable that he'll go back to a cold streak. That's just how he is, how he's been his whole career. But it's great to see him doing this now. Seattle seeing and saying, hey, he can be our goal scorer to start off our expansion team. But they probably won't because of the cap hit, but they might. But I agree with what you're saying, where he does seem to be paying closer attention on the forecheck. He seems more engaged, more physically engaged, just more aware about everything that's going on, seeing like the right play, getting the right spot. But I'm hoping that this can be a full season thing. But again, he's known to be a very streaky player. This could just be one hot streak, followed by a cold streak, followed by a hot streak, which is what we've seen in the past. But hopefully he can break that trend and just keep it going throughout the season, considering it is a shortened season.
Yeah, I think that's also why he has a better chance to keep it going. For me, because of the Flyers, until maybe a guy like a Ratcliffe in the minors, Morin can actually play forward, something like that. They don't have as much of a net front guys on their team as they should, other than guys that are smaller and provide net front presence. What you would like a bigger guy and not just Knacks of the world, TKs of the world, and guys that are Oscars that's a little bit bigger but still not JVR stature standing in front of the net for you. Where I feel if he stays hot, they probably won't expose him, but it also comes to the point of I'm pretty sure both he and Voracek are the two that don't have clauses, and you might have to decide between one of those two. That as the last guy to be exposed. That might honestly just be what it comes down to for the Flyers. They might have to end up deciding between, do you want to leave Jake exposed? Yeah, I'm looking right now. Neither Voracek or JVR have any clauses. So you would have to potentially make a decision between one of those two. Who do you want to leave out there on the grabbing block, I guess is a better way to put it, potentially for Seattle?
Yeah, I guess I agree. I'm trying to look it up too. Seattle expansion. All right. I feel like there's a situation where you could leave them both unprotected and then you really risk it. But I'm just trying to pull it up real quick. I didn't think we would get to this part of it. Because you have to protect Giroux, you have to protect Hayes, you have to protect Couturier. Patrick, I think he's eligible, but I'm trying to go through it real quick on Cap Friendly. You definitely want to protect Konechny, and then you're really going the 8-3-1 route anyway. God dang it, sorry.
No, you're good.
Provorov, Sanheim, Myers is the ideal three that we protect. We're already protecting Giroux and Hayes, Konechny, Couturier, Lindblom, and then Patrick. And then then you have one spot, and then it is. You're right. I'm sorry. It's Voracek or JVR. Unless you feel highly about German Rubtsov and don't want to lose him. But I don't think that they'll protect him. There's also Albie Kubel, who I think is a sneaky potential pick by Seattle to solidify like their bottom six if they want to.
Yeah, I think he could be the guy if they're going for a good guy to have. He's one of the best graded forecheckers. If you want to have somebody that's going to motivate others to kind of get into the dirty areas, he's definitely one of the people you want to have on your team. So I could see that potentially happening.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I really love Albie Kubel, but like you mentioned his forechecking, I feel like it has been up to like 100% as it was last year. So he's kind of a guy, he's a fourth liner right now, but I would like to see a little bit more out of him, especially on the forecheck, because he was kind of like a wrecking ball last year with it. He just hasn't shown it as much this year. Then again, we're only 7 games in though.
Yeah, I think he'll show it in time. I think in the game he had to fill in. We also saw that Bunneman definitely is ample as a depth center on the fourth line, being the 200-foot guy. So it's nice to have the depth there. But if Ghost plays like he did yesterday, that's also another possibility because you're going to leave him unprotected. So it depends how he keeps playing. 4.5, if he's playing more healthy again, is not that big of a cap hit in terms of comparing him to other defensemen. Comparing him to how he played recently, sure. But if he plays well again, that's not a big cap hit compared to the other offensive touted defensemen in the league.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that could be a possibility, but it's going to be interesting. But either way, I feel if JVR does keep solidifying himself here, he might be a guy that they're going to try to keep, or they're just going to figure they might not go for his cap tag, and they're leave him exposed there. But it's going to come down to a tough decision, a rock and a hard place between JVR and Jake most likely. And hopefully, if you leave them exposed and they both have really solid seasons, you might live to tell about it, and you don't need to worry about it anyway. But do you have
It's also the possibility of, trading them a pick to try to really protect these guys. But yeah, I don't think that they'll necessarily go that route unless Gostisbehere really proves himself to be this top 4 guy that he could have been before, kind of fell off, and then could potentially show again this year. But, a trade could always be worked out with them saying, hey, please take this guy, not this guy. That's how Vegas basically made their team. But I think teams will be a little bit more prepared now, a little bit more frugal with what they're willing to give Seattle. But I guess for the Flyers' point of view, it's would you rather lose Ghost and potentially replace him with like Zamula or Cam York, or would you rather lose Voracek, who has 1.25 higher of a cap hit, signed for an extra year than JVR, or just lose JVR? I don't know, because they're the same age. Just it really comes into like the whole salary cap aspect of it. But it's not really. It's fun to discuss right now, but we don't really know the full picture quite yet.
No, it's just fun to look ahead type thing. But as we're coming to a head here, do you have any closing points you want to have for this edition of the Disciples of Ed?
Not really. I just can't wait for Rob to get back so I can really debate him on Ghost versus Gustafsson again. Can't wait to see him try to call Ghost a liability after that game. He has more of a history on his side as opposed to one game of Ghost, but still, it would be fun.
Yeah, well, by the time we come back next week, we'll have a few more games of Ghost that you guys will be able to discuss. So you probably have a better inkling of what's going on then to be able to really debate that next week. But we also want to point out, once Rob's off from work, which is going to start next week, we're going to be doing our podcast Tuesday evenings, and it'll come out late Tuesday night for you guys to check out Wednesday mornings, opposed to Wednesday into Thursday morning, just to give you guys a heads up for our very loyal listeners that we really appreciate you all. But this has been this edition of Disciples of Ed. Please check out the Jackdaws as we send it over to the Jackdaws to wrap up our show here. As we always do, great Celtic rock band. Definitely want to check them out. So we'll send it over to them now. For Joe and Steve, this is Disciples of Ed. Have a great and safe day, everybody, and enjoy all the great hockey.
I used to be revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a rib or two, he beat me Sunday through and through, danced a jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.